Hey everyone, I'm Yvette Lloyd, host of Life Her podcast. We have an amazing guest with us today, and I would like to have you meet Victoria. Victoria is a dynamic force in a corporate leadership with over 20 years of executive experience. She's known as a turnaround queen and a CEO of Whisperer. Victoria became a COO at 24, a president by 25, and a CEO at 41. She is the number one bestseller author, global keynote speaker, and one of the top ranked social sellers on LinkedIn. Recognized for her bold leadership, DEI advocacy, and resilience, Victoria is a true example of what it means to lead with authentic and purpose in powerful ways. Hey, Victoria, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. And I love everything that we're getting ready to talk about. I'm sure my audience will love you.
Fantastic.
So we're just gonna just dive in and get things started. You've held C-suite titles at such as a young age. What do you believe has set you apart early in your career to achieve such a rapid growth?
I recognize I'm a bit of an anomaly. It's rare that it happens. And I think it was a result of a few things. And so, one, I got recruited out of running large scale banking operations to go and run large call center operations in a what's called a BPO, business process outsourcing environment. So I did have a number of years of skills and experience leading large scale call center operations, but it was a stretch role for me. And what helped bridge me towards that was I have this incredible drive. I sign a lot of my social media posts with unstoppable. That's my nature. And I also think there's a significant amount of my confidence. Confidence, I believe, for many people, it's equated to competence, rightfully or wrongfully so. So even though imposter syndrome was real, of course, 25 years ago, we didn't call it that, but that would be the good way to describe it. So, but I showed up confident in the actual skills and abilities I'd had to that point, and knowing I could hire the right people and surround myself with people who'd complement in the areas I didn't. And I otherwise just showed up confidently, which gave the CEO, who was my boss, the confidence to hire me in. So I think those were things that helped me at that point lean into such a senior role at such a very young age.
Yes, I admire the fact that you had those tools to be able to do that at a very young age. It's still some people at that age trying to figure it out, but you were on the roll.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. So, what were some of the defining leadership lessons you learned through being both in a turnaround executive and a culture builder?
Oh, a lot. I made some mistakes along the way. In fact, I often will talk about those to hopefully help other leaders not make some of the same mistakes. I came into the turnaround queen is, I'm often leading troubled portfolios or business units or divisions to get them back to, profitability or growth. And in doing that, you often need to make very difficult decisions. I have never had a hard time with that. I've always been very comfortable delivering that message. Where I went wrong is in my leadership, because I became COO at 24. So I was younger than 2 decades, than many of my peers. I was the only woman at the time. And at that time, I thought that being too emotional, demonstrating any kind of vulnerability was seen as weakness. And so I didn't balance the human side of leadership. So I think when I was around 27 or 28, so a few years into my executive leadership journey, I found out I had a nickname of the Iron Maiden. And I was like, oh, ouch. And initially I thought it was just because I'm making these tough decisions. I am driving the business forward successfully. But that was my leadership mistake. I needed to learn that vulnerability, authenticity, sharing some of my own lived experience that, contributed to who I am and how I showed up were important to share. And so I had to change, and that wasn't comfortable. So I used to be all business all the time, like going into a meeting, not stopping to chit chat and talk and understand more about the humans that I worked with. And now it's completely innate. It's how I operate all the time. So I'm proud to say my nickname is one of them is Turtle. So I still have this very tough exterior. I can handle a lot, but I do allow the marshmallow inside to be seen. So that, that's one. And then that's helped me, however, in these really transformational times, in terms of, I refer to it as whole human leadership. And so, leading with authenticity, with transparency, with empathy, while still balancing the needs of, the business. And so learning that fine balance. So those are failures and lessons I've learned, in my leadership journey.
Wow. So with you being a woman, did you find it kind of difficult being in the rooms with different dominant men that is used to just feeling as though they lead the way when a lot of women are very powerful?
Yeah, I've played competitive sports all of my life. So some of the confidence that I have comes from, being so competitive. So I actually found that part easy to
Good.
scare off with some of the men in the room. But I just always felt like I had to prove more. I had to do more to be seen in a different way. Again, vulnerability was a big thing for me. I became a mother very young as well. And so just trying to figure out all of those that my male counterparts didn't have to contend with. So and a lot of that was that more with me than it did with the men that I sat across from. And so now, coaching women, more on how to again, lean into, both, sides of the strength that they have and confidence and speaking up in those rooms. But with being authentic to themselves, and if they're emotional beings, knowing that that's okay as well. But I also got asked questions that, my male counterparts didn't. I think of when I gave birth to my second child, I didn't take maternity leave, and that was my choice. In doing that, they're like, "What?" Oh, but we don't hear that of our male counterparts. So there's just this interesting dynamic that we need to deal with as women, and for those who choose to be parents as well. That adds another layer of complexity.
Right. So what does the whole human leadership mean to you, and how can it and today's leaders adapt to the philosophy in their organizations?
This is some of what I mentioned already, just some of the traits and characteristics that I think we as leaders need to show up to. Quite frankly, I think it's what the workforce demands now. And I saw a pretty seismic shift, coming out of COVID. And I think it was just, here we had, the opportunity to reflect when, people's health and lives were impacted so greatly over what we wanted to do. We wanted to, the workforce generally wanted to, work for companies and for leaders that align to their personal values, their purpose. And in doing so, a lot of them said, I'm not dealing with the very poor leadership. And so all the headlines, quiet quitting, the great resignation. I don't love those phrases, but I mean, it was a movement. And this was the consumers in terms of who they bought from, and employees who they worked for and with, saying it has to be different. And so that for me is where whole human leadership comes in. So this is around working for and with people and with leaders who deeply care and are around an individual's career path, investing in their personal development. The newer generation thinks of job security, and I'll say, and put air quotes around that because we know there's no real security, but their view of that is the investment in themselves and development in skills. So I'm coming in with some skills today. The shelf life of skills is contracting dramatically, less than 2 years. So are we as leaders investing to take them from point A to point B to C in building for the future? And so it's finding leaders who are going to invest in time to do that. It's ones who get to know the whole human that sits in front of them. And so going back to empathy and transparency, and authenticity, which is a bit abused, that word, but in my case, that would be talking about some of the lived experience I had and the traumatic events that fueled me to be as driven as I am. If you don't know where that comes from, it might be misinterpreted. And so again, building trust in relationships with employees by all of, those added, aspects versus, I think the workforce I entered which was this command and control top down. That doesn't work anymore.
No, it doesn't. So how do you see the AI, remote work, and the gig economy reshaping the corporate workforce into the next 5 to 10 years?
Oof, dramatically. I work for a technology company where, we're advising on AI strategies, implementing it. And it's interesting because I lead all the less technical parts. I lead everything with people, with process, with change, and the outcomes of this. And so I'm glad you asked the question because I talk so much about it. So first of all, on the where we work, I think it will forever be reshaped post-COVID. We're seeing some forced return to the office. I'm not a fan of that. I think we should create trust with our employees and flexibility. But I'm not a fan of fully remote either, because there is greatness that happens when we come together. We problem solve, we innovate. I think of the opportunity to network and meet with people you might not otherwise because you came together in the kitchen, right, at the workplace. So I think I'm a big believer in hybrid workplaces, again, to create trust and flexibility for our workforce. The workforce demonstrated they were as or more productive working remotely. So I think that should be the way of the future, is more of that hybrid model, number one. So that's where we work. How we work will forever be changed as a result of technology advancement. And so I mentioned the shortening, shelf life of skills. That is rapidly even being more and more shortened because of the advance of AI in particular. And so the type of skills that are required will be different. There are still functional skills. You are a technology programmer. Well, now you have support with AI. So there's more complex elements of that you do. But maybe you're in finance, or maybe you're in HR. There's activities that are routine that go away. And I hope that people view that positively, because the work that remains, that stays behind, that doesn't get automated, is the stuff that I hope people are excited by. That is complex problem solving. That's exception management. That's if you work in a call center, that's talking, to customers about things more than just telling them, what the last payment was, or talking about transactional information, and building those kinds of relationships. And so we need to be building different types of skills, all of those functional skills at a different level, but with the more human skills, with the, innovation and problem solving. So that's going to change. And so what we need also, not just in terms of skills, is mindset. And so working towards an adaptive and agile mindset who can consistently evolve and adapt to like the changing workplace and landscape that we work in today versus, as you said, 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a huge shift. It's already shifting now, but at the same time it's kind of scary too. I just because the newer generation knows a lot of the AI, but sometimes I'm so passionate and I love the older generation, so that it's going to be a struggle for them as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So what skills do you think the future leaders must cultivate now to remain relevant in tomorrow's boardrooms?
I mentioned a couple. So, that the mindset around being resilient, because things are constantly changing. Think about like the pressures that come not only because of the change and the advancement of technologies. Think about the world we're living in right now, just economic. Look at, all of those changes. We're not going to have a political conversation, but I mean, those are changing our workplaces. So the ability for leaders to lead from the front, model that kind of adaptive mindset and ability to shift and be agile is critically important. Creating the safe places for their teams to operate in that environment, which means, and sometimes failure, that whole notion of fail fast and move on. So how do we create that kind of environment? I talked about the workforce who's looking for leaders that are going to invest in their development, and those are around skills and keeping them relevant for future. And actually, interestingly, on that point, I view the role of HR, who is a supporter to the business leaders, as much more strategic than ever. You asked me about like gig workers. I didn't necessarily address that. You need to think about this complement of the workforce between and evaluating what you have for today, the business and technology strategies for future, and how the shifts are going to evolve. And then, so the role of HR becomes like the strategic business advisor to figure out Do you just buy that talent? Like, do you, as things change, are you building it within your workplace? Do you temporarily borrow? And here's where we talk about gig economy or outsourcing or staff augmentation, temporarily for things, what gets automated, and how do you balance all of those things? So for leaders, it's much more around like being as nimble as ever and creating safety. You talked about being scared of some of these things. How do you as leaders help your teams evolve through that? So again, it's a very adaptive, empathetic type of leader to lead us in the future.
Yes, that is so important. So as someone constantly recognized for your DEI efforts, what are some of the 3 actionable steps companies can take to create more inclusive environments?
I'll say for a moment, I'm saddened to see a little bit of a roll, not a little bit, to see a rollback on a lot of DEI initiatives and spending, because the reality is the data speaks for themselves around the lack of, whether it's gender parity in certain roles, pay equity. Let's not even have a conversation around people of color in the workplace. So what I'd say first of all is start with the data, like understand the place in which you're starting from. And most HR systems typically only measure gender, particularly in the US. Other parts of the world you can capture other things, but it's voluntary to disclose other elements of your identity. So they look at gender, but you need to go as deep as you can to understand your starting place. So that's one. I often talk about strategic intentionality. So you being strategic with building the case for greater diversity and equity and inclusion in the workplace. And then the intentionality is around you can state a target, but you're not going to get there without building an action plan and living fully through that. And so if you state that you want to have improvement year over year, then you measure it, and build plans toward it. I do think, so again, I'm sad to see like the DEI, the chief diversity officer positions being eliminated, but you need someone who's an expert to help you with that on the journey. Every leader owns it. It's not HR. It's not the chief diversity officer who owns that within the workplace, but do get an expert to help you. So build the strategy, be intentional. And then for me, one other of, the ways in which I do that is, I'm hiring people. And so I, need to hold our recruitment teams, myself and my team accountable to ensuring that I've got a slate of candidates, that are diverse in the way that we want to. We need to create opportunity, for others. For me, that's, there's, data. I always like to start from a place of data to support this. That will say that women typically don't apply for roles or promotions or new roles if they don't believe they meet, let's say 9 or 10 out of the skills or requirements. Men apply at 5 or 6. Women hold ourselves back. So my role is to be really comfortable taking people that come with potential that might not have all of the skills requirements. Maybe they come with 7. My job as a leader is to help coach them and bridge them. And so those are things that I can do in building those kind of workplaces. And then last thing I'll say around that is, when we talk about inclusion, we talk about a sense of belonging. So, creating the safe places where we can feel comfortable showing up our whole selves, whether that's, coming from a community that has a particular dish that's very flavorful and smells and being afraid to bring it in a lunchroom. Knowing that we're okay to create those kind of spaces and talked about our lived experiences. So we all own that. But I mean, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Again, I think we all need to lead from the front, particularly for, those of us who have privilege. For me as a white woman born in North America, I always recognize I have privilege, but I'm also a woman and I'm a member of the LGBT community and I have a trans son. Not everyone knows those things. So I choose to share those to recognize that there's a little bit of understanding for those with other elements of our diversity.
Oh, bless you. What mistakes do companies often make when trying to implement DEI incentives, and how can they course or correct it?
I think a lot of DEI initiatives end up being a little performative. So we're going to put a float in the Pride Parade. But what are you doing to create a safe place for your LGBTQ employees? And so when I talk about that intentionality, and it's there's a lot of focus on bringing talent in the front door. So we're going to go and hire at historically Black colleges. We're going to go to the veterans groups because we want all of these different elements of diversity in our workplaces. So we might be successful hiring in, but then where it gets lost is not building the ways of working. It's policies, procedures to support. It's the language and the actions and the behavior that creates the inclusive environment that keeps people in the organization. So that's where I see they get it wrong. They're focused on talent entering in the front door, the hiring piece of it, but we're losing them out the back door because we're not, again, building the right kind of ecosystem and environment within that includes education, that, around, like diversity training and things like that, and holding people accountable and calling out poor language, poor behavior, and forcing the conversation and forcing the hand to create opportunities once they're in.
Yeah, that's true. So can you speak on like the power of representation, especially for LGBTQ and women in executive spaces, and how it changes the corporate culture?
Yeah, I think representation matters. The whole, like, when you think of like employees who are looking to join your organization, if they don't see someone that is like them, then leads them, to question. And so here, example, I said, I'm part of the LGBTQ community. I came out at 14 as bisexual. I was married to a woman for 11 years. I gave birth to my 2 children while in that marriage. Unfortunately, she passed away. I'm married to a man who adopted my children. People make assumptions because I'm feminine looking, that I'm straight. I am not. I happen to be married to a man, but I have this history, and I would still be open to dating any gender. And so for me, I was asked a number of years ago, actually, it was when I worked for IBM a number of years ago, and I was only one of 30 out executives worldwide. And I represented let's say the B in the LGBTQ. I prefer queer, just means I'm not straight, but identifying. And at the time I was like, why do I need to be on a web page and whatever? But then I thought representation matters. There were so many gay men or lesbians, but I represented this whole other segment that created, again, safety for people to speak out. And many people told me that, whether it was that or, I think of, you're a Black woman, like, so think of how important it would be for you to see, like, another Black woman in a position of power. Like, what does that say about the organization? So I recognize representation matters, but that's why I choose to speak up. People make a whole lot of assumptions based upon appearance alone. And so that's why I choose to tell my story. I choose to talk about the journey. I have a trans male son. What does that look like? What does that mean for maybe other colleagues who are straight, but their children are experiencing the same? And so that's why I choose to speak up, because I know representation matters. And that's why I think, again, going back to like just the broad DEI conversation in workplaces, I don't want to see things like the employee resource groups that allow these different groups to come together and see and experience others like them with their lived experience. I want those to stay. And by the way, those don't cost a ton of money. That's just working.
Yeah, it's a sad situation as far as everyone going through the DEI. I just rather for all of us just come together as one and fight for it and get our rights back and the different things when it comes to that, because we're all the same, and I wish a lot of people will actually see that. It's just usually the genetics, you know what I'm saying? Like our color, our gender, and everything like that. But a lot of times, if we really just hear each other out, we all are the same, literally.
Yeah, I know. It's I think a lot the same. And so I'm also of two minds. Like, I work for organizations where, we were incented to achieve diversity targets. And I like that on one hand, because I do recognize incentives drive behavior. But then on the other hand, I was saddened. I'm like, do we really have to like incent people to do the right thing? So I'm of two minds, on those things. And I prefer us just to come together and recognize, our sameness more than our differences.
Yes, it is so needed. So you turn your pain into power. How did your early life experiences shape your executive leadership style and mindset?
Mm. I yeah, I overcame pretty like extreme adversity in my childhood. And you can go different ways with that. For me, I'm a fighter. So, fight or flight. And I'll fight. I talked about being competitive and playing sports. So that's how I channeled it for me. I was determined to be better than where I came from, the circumstances behind me. So that fueled me to like drive hard. And so one, I tell the story now because sometimes I think people don't like, how did I get to my senior leadership roles? I started working at 11. By 14, I was in my first leadership role. I graduated at 16. I bought my first house at 19. You need to understand all these elements,
Yes.
understand that, but the trauma I overcame is why I drove as hard as I did. I was determined I will be better than my biology or my circumstance. And so that is like fueled me in my career. And that mindset has stayed with me since. I think of, I've been now a part of so many mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, corporate restructure, more than I could possibly count. And all of those come with such change, challenge, adversity. But I've just plucked all my experience, both on the personal side, as well as what I've gained and amassed professionally to help me with that. And I share that how I've learned to be resilient in a much healthier way than I was in my youth, like that healthy level of resilience to channel it, now both personally and professionally, as an adult and help others with it.
Wow. So what advice would you give to someone currently facing major setbacks and transition in their career?
I have I give a talk on resilience, and I talk about, I believe there's five steps, to develop a healthier way of resilience. And by that, I mean, if all you do is compartmentalize and you don't actually process the challenge or the adversity, you bottle it all up, that's not healthy. And my Iron Maiden nickname in my 20s was a little bit of that. So for me, it's be really clear on your goal or your objective. And so if you're talking about like career or setback, let's be clear. And sometimes there's a few baby steps towards that big one, so get clear on the goal and objective. The next one is to engage in quite a bit of self-reflection. Like, how did I get here? Thinking about mindset. Why am I feeling this way? How do I overcome that? With that, I use the phrase a lot, strategic intentionality. So then you need to start to model, do the things, say the things, have the thoughts that progress you towards that goal or objective. And the next one is surrounding yourself with like your tribe, your community of the people that will support you. And the last one is give yourself permission to fail. Fail fast, and then get back and go back to step number one, which is, the goal. What is that? Like, let that be that, your vision that guides you.
Yes. I love your resilience. I really do. I admire it a lot because, it's really difficult for some people to still keep going and picking up, and just like you've been doing it for so long. It's like, you make it look easy, even though sometimes you may have your moments because you're human, but I admire it. I am like so proud of you.
Yeah.
I am. Yes, because it's like sometimes people really don't understand it to a point where you already know the direction you're going. You know the power that you have. It's just the confidence within it. And if people just understand their leadership and their confidence and understanding when you fail, you got to keep going. That failure means you get closer and closer to wherever you're trying to go. You got to learn from those mistakes, man.
You do. I tell people, just remember, one foot in front of the other is progress. All right. So get back up, get back to it.
Seriously. So you were IBM's #1 global social seller and via LinkedIn. What are the key elements that made your personal brand so magnetic?
It's so there's I talk to people a lot around their personal brand. I think so many people only focus on one small slice of it, and that is what you do and who do you do it for. And so for me, so my brand is as strong as it is, and LinkedIn gave me that because I've been at it for a very long time. When I took that first executive role, I went from like a business to consumer environment to business, and I started leading sales and client teams, and I had to learn how do we sell, how do we create differentiation. So without calling it a personal brand, that started probably 25 years ago. So I've been at it a long time. So that's helped me for sure. But I learned that people do business with people they like and they trust. Therefore, they want to do business with, whether that's buy from, work for, work with. And so where people get it wrong is, as I said, they only focus on what they do and who they do it for. But going back to whole human leadership around, talking about our lived experiences. So for me, there's 4 parts to a brand. There is the what you do and the experiences you've had doing it and the stories you will talk about around how you've done it well or how you failed and you've learned. But then there's who are you as a human? So there's storytelling about you, the lived experiences, both personally and professionally. Who are you as a human? Like, what do you stand for? What are your values? And then the third part is what makes you different from others that do what you do. I work in professional services and in consulting. You are buying people, literally. You're buying their expertise, their knowledge, their experience. But there's people who have very similar experience. So why person A versus person B? And so get clear on talking about how you're different. So for me, the fact that I am very values driven, I am very focused on DEI, I'm focused on great kind of cultures and outcomes. And the fact that I don't tell clients what they want to hear, I'll tell them what they need to hear. They don't always love it, but they appreciate it, and that builds trust. That's a differentiator for me. So get clear on talking about your differentiation. And the last piece is legacy and impact. What do you want to be known for? And so when I die, I don't want them talking about all the mergers and acquisitions and the billions I've raised and working for companies. I want them to talk about that should be a part of it, but that I raised 2 really good human beings, right? That I left this place better when I left it than when I came into it. And so I'm consistently in my brand, when I write content, share content, and I engage with people, it's on one or more of those dimensions, but it's not always the first one. I see colleagues and it drives me insane. All they do is promote company content. I know nothing about who they are as a human. I don't know how they're different from other people. I don't know what they stand for. And so that well-rounded approach to brand is what helped me be known for branding. But also LinkedIn gives you that title. It's called Social Selling Index. It's more than how big your network is. It's more than the brand you have. It's around engagement as well. So for me, it's also building real relationships with people and staying connected. So all of those things, help me, get that, that title while I was at IBM and then continue on that journey. In fact, it's why I wrote a book on the topic.
Wow. So what exactly is relationship-based selling, and how does it differ from traditional sales tactics?
I'll say my phrase again. People do business with people they like and trust. And so for me, I build authentic relationships, not transactional relationships. So what I find, there's many people who are out there, they're selling a thing, whatever product or service. They've got, let's say, their like toolkit of things in there that they could go and sell. So, but do you understand the pain point or the challenge you're solving for? And to do that, you need to build a real relationship. Like understand, what's not just, okay, there's a company strategy or that, the person's strategy. There's some things they're trying to grow. They're trying to save money. They need to digitally transform, whatever it is. You need to understand that. But for me, that's things like, well, what does this personally mean for you to the person I'm sitting across the table from, literally or figuratively, if it's a, video call? Like, what does this mean for you? What does success look like for you? And then we kind of create those solutions together, but I choose to do it from a place of care, compassion, and like building the real relationship. Am I happy if my company makes money? And yes, I am. But there's a very different way to approach those kind of relationships. And like I said, it's not transactional. So for me, chosen to, and going back to the last comment around like social selling index and network, I stay connected with people. Like, so for me, if I'm like, drives my husband crazy, but like we could be sitting at, out in a restaurant, someone comes to mind, someone walks by, reminds me. And so I drop them I grab my phone, grab them a quick, like one-liner. Hey, I thought of you. How are you doing? Right. Like, and then it goes from there. And so there's just very different ways to like thinking about how to sell and deliver based upon a real relationship versus this transactional nature, dialing for dollars, so to speak. And like, and it like the old outbound telemarketing days.
So how, like, what's next for you for your big visions and projects that we should watch out for?
Well, I gave a TED talk last year, TEDx talk. I want it to be the big main TED stage. So that, that's a goal or aspiration of mine. I'm hoping they call me directly. And then beyond that, I'm looking to go back at some point to being the CEO. I'll go all the way, work for a very large publicly traded company in a senior role. I look to going back to being a CEO of a company at some point. So that's on the agenda. And I do some board work, but looking to take that to the next level. So those are all the things on the proverbial vision board for me.
Wow. So if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice for creating lasting legacy, what would it be?
Lasting legacy. Well, first of all, understand what legacy you want to create, right? Like I think you develop the goal or objective around legacy, but then the narrative around how you get there. But I think what holds people back oftentimes is fear and discomfort. And so, if I leave your listeners, something, it's one of my favorite quotes by George Adair, and it says, "Everything you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear." And so, I tell your listeners to step into that zone of discomfort. That is where like greatness and challenge and opportunity comes. And hopefully that's what ties directly to the legacy and impact you want to be known for.
Wow. So how can people connect with you, follow your work, and bring you in as a speaker or even a mentor?
Best way is One Stop Shop is my website, which is Victoria-Pelletier.com. I'm sure you'll have that in the show notes so they don't figure out the spelling of that. And then from there, they can connect with me on all of the other platforms.
Wow. So thank you so much, Victoria. I learned a lot from you. I really have. And you are an amazing woman.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to Life Heard Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on Life Heard Podcast YouTube channel and also on all major platforms audio. Thanks.